everything I was going to say has been said, which is awesome because that makes me realize that everybody is awake, and everybody is starting to be awake. And our message mostly is people need to wake up. People need to teach their children. I see a few children here, but that is kind of our message all along, is where's the youth? They are the hope of our nation. And so where are they? Today, I'm going to take a minute, and if you want to sit down, you can. For 2 years, I was queen of the castle. And I've been demoted. Some of you weren't paying attention. First off, I didn't know that. Where did Dave go? I didn't know he could ever be speechless. And here he's saying these green eyes make him speechless. So, what a fun story that was. Most of you know by now that I am the mother of Ammon and Ryan, and they kind of threw us under the bus because they didn't want to fly. And there's a good reason for that, because the TSA does not treat domestic terrorists very well. And we are still, even though all charges have been dropped, we're still on the list. I also want to say, in going with what Susan was saying, you know what? Welcome. If there's some FBI people here or some spies of any kind, you know, I'd be outside the courthouse and people would say to me, don't talk to so-and-so, you know, he's an informant, and don't talk to so-and-so. And I say, you know what? The truth never changes. My story never changes. I have people driving by to check how many supporters I have, and the more people that are out here, the better. So thank you very much for standing with us. One of my favorite cowboy quotes is, the best preparation for tomorrow is doing your best today. So, with my talk today, let's saddle up, let's ride with spirit, let's ride with strength, and let's ride with conviction, because that is the cowboy way. Now I ask you, a lot of people ask me, how did I make it, how did I do it, where did I get my strength? I want to say, doesn't a wife to a rancher, a stubborn one by the way, a mother to 14 children. I will soon be a grandmother to 70. I've got twins coming next month. And a great granny to 4 and 2 on the way. Now, thank you. If America is not going to teach their youth, then I'm going to raise a family that's going to teach America. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story. First off, I'm excited. I have never been this far away from home. I've never been to the east at all. The west is my home, and you know what? It is beautiful here. It's green, and there's trees. And it's beautiful. So I want to start at the very beginning. I had ancestors come across on the Mayflower. So they landed not too far from here. And guess what they did when they hit dry land? They did, but before they did that, they got on their knees and they thanked God. They thanked God for being free from a king, to be able to worship how they wanted, and to be able to own land, own a business, own a gun, do whatever they darn well pleased. And they were thankful for that. And then they dug their fingernails down into the dirt and they went to work. And they planted gardens and they became friends with the Indians. And in fact, one of my great, however far back, because I don't know how old I am, I don't remember anymore, actually married one of the Indian princesses. So I guess you could say I'm really a native in a lot of ways here. They planted gardens and homes, and they learned to love their neighbor. This is freedom and liberty continued into the 13 colonies. And I had ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War. Yep, they carried guns. Then they also became involved in the divinely inspired Constitution, which also gives us our First and Second Amendment rights, which is what we stood on during our protest. But this love for freedom continued. It continued. They became some of the first of the Mormon pioneers. And guess what? That scared a lot of people, this new religion that was growing so fast. And so they were actually chased out across the Missouri River from the very country that they loved, from their homes, from their farms, from their ranches. But guess what they did when they crossed that Missouri River? They were wet, they were tired, and they were a little bit hurt because they were kicked out of their homes. They got on their knees, and once again, they thanked God for freedom. They thanked God that they could have the freedom of religion. They thanked God that they could own their own home and their own land and their own ranch. And they even thanked God for that flag from a country of which they'd just been kicked out of. But then what did they do? They dug their fingers down into the soil and they went to work. Because guess what? There's freedom and liberty literally in their blood. And they went to work. Now I have a great-great-grandmother who, as an early pioneer, remembers waking up as a small child to the clang of cowbells. Most of you might not know what that is. But if you lose your milk cow, it comes in pretty handy. Also the clang of Dutch oven legs saying, "Wake up, wake up, it's Independence Day." And she says she can remember watching the lead wagon clear up ahead in the dust, and there was an American flag flying on that. And from that day forward, my grandmother kept a flag of some sort with her till the day she died. With the exception of one time, as her husband had passed away and she was going back home, she planted that flag on his grave as his marker. So you see, we have a lot of liberty and strength in our blood. Now, as the story goes, my husband's family settled in Bunkerville, Nevada, and the Arizona Strip. My family settled in Wyoming. They were poor, they had very little, but they were strong in spirit, and they loved liberty, and they were willing to fight and stand for that liberty. They too were cowboys, and so that's where we come to our way of life. It's a custom, it's a culture, it's what we stand for, it's what we represent. And if you and as it was just said, you have to claim it, you have to use it, you have to defend it. And that's exactly what my family and Clive's family has done for years. It's the cowboy way. Thank you. So where do we get this spirit other than, and what makes us strong, and where is conviction found, and why would we stand? And Clive is going to show you some pictures. Why would we stand against an army that was pointing guns at us? And I had a reporter say to me, "Well, you were pointing guns." And I said, "I didn't point a gun at anybody, but I sure had a whole lot of them pointed at me." And I said, "There's thousands of pictures on the internet." I told the reporter, "You go through, and if you can find us pointing one gun at somebody, you let me know." Because I said the guns that were being pointed was by an overreaching government who we have allowed to have too much power. Now I'm going to tell you a little story that I'm going to veer away from because I don't know why, but I had a midlife crisis a few years ago and I bought me a helicopter on eBay. It was a self-built helicopter, so I was taking my life in my hands, and I did learn to hover it a little bit, but Clive made me put a big piece of cement on the bottom because I don't know if he's afraid I was going to fly away or what. Anyway, we put it in the shed and kind of forgot about it. In 2012 was when they decided actually to first come after our ranch, our cattle. And they had Homeland Security, they had FBI, and they had the sheriffs come to our ranch and to our neighbors and to our town and ask a million questions about the Bundys, because you know what we would say? We'll do whatever it takes, and they wanted to know what that meant. And we would say, depends on what you do. We don't know what we're going to do. We're going to stand. We're going to do whatever it takes. Well, they had been there and they thought they knew everything possible about us. And every time they would come and ask Clive another question, then the sheriff and his deputies and one of the Homeland Security people would say, can we go down and look at your cows? Let's see how they look. And Clive would walk them down, because then they could snoop on the way back. Well, I assume one of the grandkids left the door open to my helicopter shed. Clive was walking back with the sheriff and they were talking, and pretty soon the sheriff stepped back. He says, "You have a helicopter?" Clive said, "Sure."
Of course we do.
"You know how to fly it?" Clive says, "Well, it's a little dusty. You can see that I haven't flown it for a while." But he says, "You ought to see the 50 caliber that I can strap on that." Helicopter, I truly believe that helicopter saved us in 212 from what happened in 214. Because I think they said, we have been on this family, we've been following this family, we've been to their home, we've ate at their dinner table, we've done all this, and we didn't know they had a helicopter. What else do they have that we don't know about? And so I kind of teased Clive a little bit, because I said, it's time to get the helicopter out, because, you know, I'm not getting any younger. And I think we're going to do it. But that comes with spirit, strength, and conviction. We pled with the sheriff in 214. We actually demanded him to do his job, to protect our life, liberty, and property. We got no response, very little response. So we faced down a tyrannical government who, in full military combat uniforms, stole our cattle, killed many of them, ran them to death. We'll never know exactly how many, because unlike Jeanette Finicum, we run wild cows. They're kind of hard to catch. Sometimes they haven't even seen a man for years, so they got a little Brahma in them. And I don't know, I'm talking to a lot of people that don't know a lot about cows, because I can tell you I've come this far and I haven't seen one yet. But a Brahma cow is one of the few breeds that sweat. So they thrive on the desert. And they're smart. They can hear a truck and they know if it's your truck or somebody else's truck. They know if you're going to feed them or what you're going to do. If you take their calf, if you wean their calf away from them in one area, they won't leave their calf there another year. They're a very smart animal. And we've bred a special breed. And so those cows can run a long time. So for them to run them to death, they totally abused the cattle. We had a lot of babies, 43, Clive, babies that didn't have mamas in the end that we had to bottle feed. But they terrorized my family, they terrorized our neighbors. There was communication equipment just above my house so that they could watch and see who came, who went, and hear everything that was said in our home. There were spies on the hill, we knew, watching my children and my grandchildren as they played in the yard. And they get many verbal and threats. They told my son Ammon at one point, they looked at him, pointing at him and said, "Before this is over, I'm going to kill you." Wow. Now see, that doesn't come out in court because we're not ones that really tell people that, but that's what we were facing. That is strength, that is courage, that is conviction. We didn't carry a gun. We have guns, we just weren't carrying them. We trusted in God. With strength, with courage, and with conviction that comes from only what you have in your heart. Now today, people want to say, well, where do you go from here? Well, all that we stood for is still in jeopardy. The cowboy way is still being regulated out of business through terms and conditions and contracts with the BLM. And we've been a little frustrated with Jeanette. Yeah, she got to turn her cows out, but yeah, she signed a contract with the Bureau of Land Management. And that is one of the things that we have stood for, is that they didn't have jurisdiction to come get us because we didn't have a contract with them. We fired them 25 years ago because they were regulating us out of business. I don't know how many of you are business people, business owners, but if you had the federal government come to you, and we heard about an Amish man who's in prison now and said, you know what, next year we figure maybe you need to cut your business in half by 50%, and our rates are going to go up a little bit. So just be prepared. What would you do?
Get my gun out.
Get your gun out. You cannot run a business with the government telling you how to run it, because it just doesn't work. It gives them more power, and we lose our business. So it's a struggle, but I'm going to tell you something, it's worth it. Because I have dirt under my fingernails, and I have liberty in my blood that's been passed down for generations.
All right.
And I have a husband that works me really hard too. Now, as I said earlier, we're still on the terrorist watch list, so when it comes time to fly, and I was going to bring my ticket up, but I get 4 S's on it. Well, first off, I can't pre-print my ticket, so already I know. So we have to get there. They finally, after standing about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the airport, they'll print your ticket and it'll have 4 S's on the bottom, which means you're on their terrorist watch list. So, but I choose to look at it because I'm kind of really a positive person. I have to be when you have a family like mine. I choose to look at it as making me special. One of the S's stands for special, doesn't it? Yeah. And I get special escorts. I get a special pat down, a very thorough one, I might add. Super special. And I get special escort to the plane. And then oftentimes I get another special pat down, and then everybody else that's on the flight with me gets treated special too, because they have to show their license the one final time, and they're all a little upset. But I will do whatever it takes for the freedom of this country. If it means I have to go to the airport 2 hours early, and if it means I have to have that special treatment, by dang, I'm going to do it. Because I am not going to let them win. We are the people. We are America. I had pilgrims that came here for freedom, and we shouldn't go backwards. We shouldn't allow that. We shouldn't let that. And there's things we can do.
Get a special husband.
I have a very special husband. That's why I have the S's on my thing. And he's strong, and he's full of conviction and strength. I have a son. My son Mel said he didn't stand so my children wouldn't have to. I stood so my children would know how. And I want to say that when this went down in 2014, and they had their little First Amendment area, and people started seeing what was going on, the first people to call, the first people to come, and the first people to arrive were not my neighbors that lived down the road, but it was people like you from this East Coast. In fact, over 50% of the people that came and stood with us came from right around here. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now what do we do today? That's the next question everybody asks. What do we do today? Well, that's a good question, because, like I say, I'm just an arm here. In fact, he told me the other day he's the boss. So, that's fine.
Wait a minute, he hasn't learned yet?
Well, I just learned to keep I learned to keep my mouth shut and think that he is, and then we get along great. So, we have a decision, and our decision is, do we forgive and forget and hold the feds accountable? Or do we let God do that? and go on with our life. We've considered filing a suit against our state officials because our state officials are the ones that should have protected our life, liberty, and property, and they failed to do that. We have a sheriff who was we just had our primaries. Our sheriff perjured himself 3 times on the stand during the trials, and he was just re-elected in the primary. And so, you know, we might need to deal with him a little bit. We haven't decided. My husband and sons were in jail for 700 days. Their families suffered greatly. I tried to do what I could do. I had a son that was 16 at the time, 17, when his dad was arrested. And he stayed and helped me on the farm. In fact, he stayed and did the farm. I was just the boss. Bosses don't work, do they? Anyway, he is now serving a mission for our church in Chile. When you went, you feel, I don't know if you guys understand, but you fill out papers and say you want to go on a mission, and then they look, and one of the questions it asks is there something that we should know about your family, and he just said, well, I want to go teach our gospel somewhere where I'm not known for my name, where I'm known for God. And when he got to Chile, he said, Mom, and I just did an email because I don't get to physically talk to him, he said, the people of Chile love the Bundys. And yes, they know who you are. I've had people from Russia, people from England, people from Italy, all over the world that have called or stopped by to say we support you, and America is still in our eyes the freest country in the world. And what is going to happen? And so when she did drop the charges, the world celebrated with us, and we were so grateful for that. With spirit, with strength and conviction, everything is going to fall into place. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I do know one thing: God knows. And I have left it in His hands to guide us and to tell us where to go, because He was with us, and He still is. We did not look left or right, step forward or backward until we had prayer. And for those of you that went to court, I don't know if you knew, but every day before we went in that courtroom, we met in the corner and we had a prayer. And we prayed that judge might be a little confused as to what she should do. And we prayed that the truth would come out, because the truth never changes. And it did in the end. It did. Peter Marshall said, we may think of freedom not as a right to do as we please, but as the opportunity to do what is right. And you know, that is not a privilege, that is a right. And our freedom is worth doing whatever it takes to keep it. We need to do whatever it takes to keep those guns, to keep a militia. That's part of our God-given rights. You know, and like was said earlier, I've never seen a gun go off and hurt anybody. It's the person behind the gun. So we need to remember that. I've always tried to endure with dignity. That's what people say, how are you doing? I'll say, I'm trying to endure with dignity, and I hope that I did. I hope that I was an example of strength, because that was my goal. And it wasn't only that for the people that were watching, but it was for my family. I have a large family, and they looked to me for strength. They looked for me to courage. They wanted to know what would happen next. So I tried to be that strong woman, and hopefully I was. Another cowboy quote that I have, it says, you may get knocked down on the outside, but the key to living in victory is to learn how to get up on the inside. My desire as a rancher's wife is to endure with dignity and strength. And to those who know me, to say that she was unstoppable. Not because she did not have failure or doubts, but because she continued on in spite of them. Don't let anybody break your soul. We're all here for the same purpose. We're all here for the same reason. We are here to save and preserve the Constitution of the United States. And we need to vote in people and elect people who are willing to have that same strength and conviction to do that. That is another right that we have. It's not a privilege to vote. It's a right to vote, and we need to be there in numbers to vote. There's much work to do. We need to educate. They've got camps, they've got books. We need to teach the proper form of government because our youth do not know the proper form of government, and the bulk of us do not know the proper form of government. Sheriff Mack was just talking about, you know, how important it is to have a good sheriff. And I know that sometimes we live in states like these on the East Coast, and Nevada's not far from it, where there's so many people that don't understand the power that they have in that vote. They look to their elected officials to save them, and that is wrong. Their elected officials are only to protect their life, liberty, and property. It's up to us to stand and do the right thing. So once again, using my cowboy language, let's saddle up and ride, cowboy. Let's get her done. Let's get her done using spirit, strength, and conviction. Thank you.